Kirsten, how are you?
Good. How are you, Rachel? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I really love how Irish Wish is continuing the recent uptick in rom-coms in that as I don't want to call them cheesy way, but it is in that way from like the 2000s and the 90s where it was like a very loved up version of a rom-com, which we had moved away from. For you
Mhm.
as a writer, was that something that you wanted to really capture with this movie?
Yeah, I think it was just in my bones because I've been writing, well, in the film industry for 23 years.
Mhm.
And so what actually inspired me in my early years to be a filmmaker, I went in to be a director. I ended up becoming a writer because I didn't believe in myself when I was in my early years. And what actually inspired me was all the working title rom-coms, Bridget Jones' Diary, Notting Hill, Love Actually, About a Boy, which is sort of not really a rom-com, but was my favorite movie. Those films, mostly written by Richard Curtis, were like such a huge inspiration for me. And that was like, and even like My Best Friend's Wedding, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, like those movies were everything to me and like sort of shaped me as a young adult and like in my early years in my career. And so um, that was always my influence and always my intention was to make movies like that. It's just, and I've been making rom-coms for probably the last 8 or 9 years. And so with Irish Wish, it was like it was just that was always my intention. I just didn't know the world was going to catch up, like that's what I wanted. That was what I envisioned. And I'm just so grateful that the world's on board with wanting to see these kind of rom-coms too. Like I love the high concept. I love that wish fulfillment and um yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's funny you said Richard Curtis, and he wrote my favorite episode of TV that inspired me to like move to New York and like become a writer and all that kind of stuff. So it is Richard Curtis's work is does have that
Oh,
quality to it, and I
which,
love it.
which episode was that?
Vincent and the Doctor on Doctor Who, which is
Oh,
and it's talking about wish fulfillment. It is where they take Vincent Van Gogh and he gets to see kind of how his work inspires people after the fact. But it
oh,
is
oh.
wish fulfillment as a whole. I think it's such a fun kind of world to get to play in. And with Irish Wish in particular, I do love how when it flips to this like wish world, the rom-com elements that exist between Ed and Lindsay's characters like ramp up. Because I
Mhm.
loved it almost felt like 27 dresses when they were stuck in the bar together. And I loved her falling into a car. Were you intentionally calling back to other rom-coms or were you working to just make sure that this had all of those elements all thrown into it?
I think I think me anyways as a writer, I'm always influenced by like what I see and watch, and like there's things that like are unconsciously like embedded in me when I write, like because it's just like what I love. It just like comes through. Like you just have little hints of things. Like I'm always doing little odes of like to certain movies and things like that. And yeah, definitely with this one, we wanted to have like a lot to have all the fun and those like comedic elements that was important to kind of have some of that physical comedy. Um, and yeah, and actually, it's my first time doing a, a wedding movie in this way. So it was like I wanted to have those, like you want to have those moments, right? Like it's fun.
And you also have Lindsay Lohan getting to play this role, which we know she has those comedy chops. Were you aware when you were writing it that it was going to be for Lindsay?
Not originally, no. So I came up with the idea back in March of 2019.
Mhm.
That's when the company MPCA first reached out to me and said, "Do you have any ideas for Netflix?" And I was like, "I'll come up with some." And I pitched them a few, and this was our favorite one. And so I moved forward to write the script. And so when I was writing it, I was more originally the movie was set in Italy, and then it was actually the musician Dermot Kennedy, who I was like obsessed with at the time. It was his music that inspired me to change the setting to Ireland, and that's because I wanted to go see him in concert there. I had a ticket to the Dublin show in December 2019. I'm like, I gotta go to this show, so I made it a research trip, and I wrote the script while I was there, and then I sort of did it all on my own without them on board. I wanted to write the story that I wanted to tell, and then uh, when I was there, I wrote it. I met a lot of people that influenced it, uh, And then I delivered the script to them. They loved it. They optioned it. And it was like a few years journey before Lindsay came on board. So like we spent a year like getting notes from MPCA, Brad Kervoy and Amanda Phillips and their team, sort of crafting the puzzle pieces, because it's the story is exactly the same, but yet there's like things that have changed. Like it's so funny to like, I just reread my first draft, like just to kind of see like how far like it had gone, because I think I wrote 12 drafts of the script. I'm like, it's the same movie, but it's just that like it's just was tweaking all the way along, right? And but once Lindsay came on board, I think Netflix said they were interested probably like somewhere around the end of 2020 or something like that, which is sort of when I had the script to a good place. And then it was probably like a year later or maybe 6 months later that Brad mentioned that Lindsay was interested and on board. And I like nearly lost it. And then that was when Netflix was like, okay, because at the beginning when they were interested, they had a lot on their slate and they weren't able to um, get to it right away. So I was like, okay, we're just sort of in this waiting game and being patient. And then it was, yeah, about 2022, I think, actually, when they were like, okay, we're ready to go. Lindsay's on board. We need to give you notes. And then it was like, because Lindsay Lohan is on board, we're going to elevate this story. We're going to add more comedy. We're going to like amp up, deepen the arcs. We're going to amp it up in different ways just because we're dealing with like a superstar. And so and also what was so cool is that Lindsay has Irish roots, So then it was like, we changed Maddie, the lead character, to also have Irish roots because in the original draft she didn't, right? So once we knew Lindsay was on board, it was like, okay, this couldn't be any like we couldn't have dreamed it any better.
Yeah. And I do love what you were saying. It was a research trip, but did your own, like, switching it from Italy, which is on its own a romantic place, to Ireland, which doesn't necessarily have that, like, we all know it's beautiful, but it's not necessarily like deemed as one of the most romantic places on the earth.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had that on your shoulders to kind of make your Ireland in this movie romantic, since that's not necessarily where our brains are going to be the moment we start watching this movie?
That's so funny that you say that. Like I was more the reason why I was like having trouble with it with Italy because it's a wish movie, a wish fulfillment. And originally I'm like, oh, the Trevi Fountain, that'll be great. But then it was like it didn't feel magical enough. Like it just and I was like, Ireland is like the land of fairy tales and like there's like leprechauns and fairies and like it's a place where people make wishes. Like there's wishing chairs like I suddenly was like, no, there's this magical element that is like innate in Ireland that I think better serve the story. And then to me it's so beautiful that like the Cliffs of Moher were so romantic, like, and I so it's so green and lush, and I think the cinematographer and Janine, the Damien, the director, they were able to capture that beauty and the romantic side of it. I don't know. To me, I think it's pretty romantic, but
It is
maybe
after watching Irish Wish. I'm like, I get it. But as for last good question, you said before that you were constantly just making rom-coms and trying to bring it back, and now the world's kind of caught up and we're all back on the rom-com train.
yeah.
For you, what is it about this genre in particular that is just so fascinating to kind of fall in love with and keep coming back to?
Um, I think it's love. Like it's so funny because even when I watch like an episode of TV or I watch like a heist movie or a thriller, I'm still looking for the love story. Like I'm like, oh, are they gonna get together? Like, when are they gonna get together? And so I just love that. And for me, I love banter. Like I love the wittiness of like with rom-coms you can have that sort of like back and forth, the clever witty dialogue, things like that. I love that. That's what I love about rom-coms, but also I've noticed rom-coms have the most character development and depth I've found than like a lot of other films. Like, maybe you don't notice it because there's so many other things to distract you, like of the like how amazing the scenery is, or the visual effects, or the action, or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying like a lot of movies do have it, and a good movie has a good character arc. But I found that with writing rom coms, the notes I'm getting from the network executives, and also my intention is to take these characters on a hero's journey, and they really do sort of go on this evolution and find themselves over the course of the story. And like for me, I always want to have the audience leave feeling like they've, like, you know, I've been inspired, or like had a cathartic experience, or something. They take away something from it. Like, I don't want to waste anyone's time. If you're watching a movie that I made, like, I want you to leave there feeling good, and feel like something good happened, or like you've been changed or moved or whatever in some way, touched in some way. And so I think rom-coms have that because they make you feel good. It's going to be a happy ending. Well, you hope it is anyways. The good ones.
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking with me. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait for people to see Irish Wish.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to meet
Of
you and
course.
chat.
Have a great
Take
one.
care. Bye.